Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the final day of the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. We began this contest with 32 different teams from across 4 regions. Only 4 teams now remain, and of course, by day's end, we will have a champion in this, the first ever Mythic Dungeon Invitational. My name is Robert Wing, and joining me on the desk, helping me open up the semifinals, it's going to be Sloot and Jack. Gentlemen, are you excited today? We finally find out who wins this whole thing.
I am definitely very excited. It's about time that we see all that min-maxing we're talking about, the smallest mistakes, the highest stakes are here, everything's ready to go.
It's been a long time coming, especially for different regions, and finally seeing how these regions are stacking up against each other and seeing which one is really going to be taking it home today.
Yeah, it's certainly exciting when we look at the spread now. We have 2 teams from Asia Pacific, 1 from North America and 1 from Europe. I definitely did not expect to see this much Asia Pacific representation, but I am super excited to see it.
It's going to be nice. 2 teams in APAC.
Yeah. We see now the global bracket here. Premonition versus Honestly is going to be our first semifinal of the day, and then we move on to Free Marcy versus Raider.io. This first one, though, Premonition versus Honestly, this has all the makings of, frankly, being one of, if not the best series of the entire tournament.
I mean, I honestly agree. It should be. We've never made that joke, right?
We definitely have not yet.
Excellent. Yeah, it's all eyes on this. I mean, these have been the top contenders in their region coming in, the equivalents of Raider.io within APAC and NA, so it's going to be a pretty big series.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we were looking at kind of the progression of China into Asia Pacific into Europe and North America, it's very easy for us being from North America to kind of bias ourselves and say, okay, well, the European and North American teams are really the strongest, and honestly maybe necessarily didn't have the toughest region to get out of, but honestly came in and they've taken no prisoners. They have looked extremely sharp. They brought that Warlock, have a little bit of their own finesse, and I'm really excited to see what they do.
And that's one thing you're kind of talking about with Honestly is that, you see, I mean, Premonition and Honestly both had this kind of attitude towards them as they're going through the qualifiers, as they're going through the regionals, where they just kind of ran over all the other teams there. So now it's just these excellent teams from each region that are actually going to be able to square off each other, just some of the highest quality that we've seen so far. Yeah,
and what are they battling for? A pretty reasonable prize pool, all things considered. $100,000 for being good at video games. Whew, it's pretty nice. Ooh. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, but this is something that's really cool. This is not part of like a global circuit or necessarily anything that's year-round. This is, you're out there with your friends, your guildies, you're running Mythic Dungeons, and you just turn out to be really freakishly good at them, and now you have the opportunity to make a boatload of money.
I mean, I wish I had that when I was growing up.
Thankfully, most of the teams involved, I think they're probably adult age. So, Sloot, I think you technically maybe could have been involved in this, but here's how the prize pool breaks down. We see the 5th through 8th place teams decided yesterday in the quarterfinals. Friends with Affixes, Team MPE, rest in peace. Team Big Pull and Team MMT, of course, rounding up 5th through 8th. Those were their winnings. And look, if you win first prize, that's $50,000. That is a lot of money. Divided up amongst your 5 teammates, it's still $10,000 per person, and that's a really cool thing to win right there.
Assuming equal share, you never know. These teams.
I would like to go back, and see maybe if some of the teammates after some of the teams yesterday in the quarterfinals maybe divided up the earnings a little differently. Maybe some players pull a little bit more weight than others, but.
The Team MPE soloing, the DK soloing Rockmora.
Yeah, I was going to say, the DK probably asking for a little bit more in his share, but yeah, certainly a lot of money up for grabs here, and a lot of pride. Again, this is the first time we're doing this. You could be the very first Mythic Dungeon Invitational champion, and honestly, as much as the money's a big factor, I think that'd be pretty cool too.
Yeah. Not just that, like the regional pride there, where you're saying this region is dominating. I mean, we have, 3 non-European teams going up against the European Titan of Raider.io, so I mean, this game right here, Premonition versus Honestly, I mean, either team could go forward, could beat Raider.io, and really just take it all home.
Yeah, fun piece of trivia. If memory serves, both of their times on Vault of the Wardens yesterday, Honestly and Premonition, were actually faster than Raider.io. So as much as we've been building up Raider.io, there's certainly some stiff competition here. Taking a look at the rosters, though, for Premonition versus Honestly. Jack, why don't you tell us a little bit about Premonition?
Well, Premonition here has just always been running with this pretty solid overall, straightforward comp. I mean, Sist early on busted out the Unholy DK. Top Cats, for example, was playing Mage at some points. But I really like that they're sticking with this Arm Warrior sub-rogue. This is something we've seen throughout just most other group comps and things like that. It's been very, very straightforward here. You can see, you're seeing E-Man here. The big focus on the Moonglaves. You're going to talk about the tank, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, we have usually kind of 2 builds that you typically see between Guardians. You often either see, for offensively speaking, you either see kind of an in-card build with, Lufa's legs, things like that. And of course, there we saw that he's doing kind of a GG Galactic Guardian build for a lot of that kind of Moonfire splash.
And you're seeing Zach here running pretty standard build for Holy Paladin here. He is taking he's taking the Light's Hammer, so he's able to get a lot more AoE damage out. Starting off the Umbral Moonglaive, so you'll be able to see just a lot more AoE damage here. It's going to be a very, very big focus for him. He's probably going to switch around. He might switch around his second legendary, his Trinket, from time to time, but he definitely will be having Maraud's on. That's something he always really, really favors, is that Lights of the Martyr extra healing there.
Yeah, it is definitely worth noting, you know, because everyone at home is, of course, always curious about a lot of these talents and a lot of the gear choices. Gear is a bit tougher to track because these players do have, of course, access to all of the legendaries. And, of course, any well-seasoned team that is trained a lot, practiced a lot, will be very frequently swapping a lot of these legendaries out. I expect that Agrimar strat will probably not stay on him the whole time.
Yep, and you're seeing, I mean, the same thing with the trinkets as well, where you're seeing, you know, just the fact that they're able to constantly be able to switch between different trinkets. I mean, you have things like Unstable Arcana Crystal, which we're seeing a lot of because it is just so much in the way of stats. It's just such a powerful trinket that we're seeing all the time. So definitely being able to, you know, have all those trinkets at their disposal and just having the flexibility from going to
that Shivermaw's job one in there, one of my favorites for tanking as well.
Does Topcats know he's about to play? I think he's actually, everyone else is dancing. I think Topcats is just napping.
He might be practicing his feigned death at the moment.
Of course, Malvo's a good friend of his, just trying to wake him up, alert him to what is going on here.
Yeah, trying to wake him up, and unfortunately he can't wake up.
Wake me up inside.
Unfortunately can't wake up. But you know what really stands out to me about Premonition is, you know, as the competition has gone on, we've really seen all these different takes on, okay, what is a good composition on a map-per-map basis, but Premonition has just pretty much stuck with what I'd call, like, the good stuff. They kind of just have the juice in terms of their comps. It's okay. Subtlety Rogue is really strong. Let's bring Subtlety Rogue. Arms Warrior really strong. Let's bring Arms Warrior. The Marksmanship Hunter has just cranked out a ton of DPS, which is what you expect from that. But there really hasn't been a whole lot of fancy bells and whistles. They're just, okay, we're going to execute really well. We're going to have a good comp, and we're going to make it work for us.
But, you know, that's what we've been seeing from all four of these teams in the semis. And then we always come back to it in the series. You know, we go, they didn't do anything exceptional, but they just played it by the book extremely well. Zero mistakes. And that's what all four of these teams bring. So that's why it's going to be really exciting to see this series, especially because they all know how good they are. So it's going to apply extra pressure at each team to perhaps go outside of that comfort zone.
Yeah, we have seen a little bit of, you know, wonky strats, for example, from like Honestly, where they're able to use the Warlock to have their Bubble Boy, as they called him. So they're always getting that big haste buff that's coming out. But overall, like you're talking about, you know, a lot of times we're not really seeing crazy fancy things, and it's really not required to be winning this. It's just very clean, straightforward play.
Well, you know it's not going to be clean or straightforward. It's going to be opening up on Cathedral of Eternal Night with this combination of affixes. I hope you like mean-spirited trash, because that is exactly what you're going to run into here. Gentlemen, Cathedral of Eternal Night, our first semifinal. Take it away.
So, of course, Jack, it's important to note that we don't have the usual affixes that we've seen on previous cathedrals. Today we have Bolstering, Explosive, and Fortified to start off in here. Of course, both teams have already pulled. With the Fortified, this trash is a lot more dangerous. I'd expect, as we're seeing right now, both teams to pull those first two packs out the get-go. But remember, in previous series, we did see that mini-boss get pulled right away as well.
Yep, and you're seeing Premonition here with the red border at the main screen here. Both Honestly and Premonition have very similar pulls here, and you're going to be seeing the Warlock, of course, you know, later on going to be taking care of the ad that's going to be spawning those green bubbles. The green bubbles will deal a little bit of damage to everybody who stands inside, but it will be a very, very large haste increase that they'll be able to take advantage of. So it's going to be very important. I mean, it was very important for the strategy we saw in the regional qualifiers, in the regional tournament, to be able to take advantage of that extra haste buff constantly throughout the rest of this run.
And Premonition's going to have to be really careful here because it is bolstering, and they did pull dual Zac, as they said, I am coming for you. So if they kill any of those ads, it will bolster this mini-boss style mob dual Zac. Of course, nothing too dangerous from him. You just have to avoid that huge shadow wave in the front, which will one-shot you, especially on Fortified. But they have to be very careful to DPS all of these mobs in a very disciplined manner to make sure they all die at the same time. Meanwhile, of course, DPSing those explosive orbs, you have to single target them. If they do go off, you will be damaged for 50% of your max HP party-wide.
I mean, you're seeing a very good job by Premonition getting everything down all together here. Really trying to avoid any of that extra health, any of the extra damage is going out. You know, very good positioning overall to be avoiding any of the shadow waves here. And I mean, both teams, you know, are pulling very efficiently, very effectively here. And Premonition's got a little bit of a lead as they're going forward into these next big trash packs.
I think I am already seeing the banish from Honestly's Warlock down there doing their trick from before. I'm not sure. I think I see a banished target. We'll keep an eye on that in a moment. Premonition, of course, moving up to these Dreadwing Bats. These are particularly dangerous as they do a big shadow frontal that will punt the tank, deal substantial damage to anyone in front, and of course has that ever important fear, AoE fear, that must be interrupted. Otherwise the groups will kind of run all over the place and dangerously get near the edge of the balcony where they might risk pulling even more of them by accident.
Exactly right. And here we're seeing, just as that last bolster goes up with the Invader, E-Man's running away. It's very, very important with these bolstering to, have very strong slows to be able to kite away, get away from these mobs when they start getting extremely, extremely deadly here. Because, it's always very tough to get all these different mobs, especially the ones with different HP levels, getting them all down at the exact same time. So eventually, you're just going to have this point where you have to just run away, let some of the DPS, let some of the dots take care of it, and be able to move on from there.
I'm wondering why they're pulling them out of that haste bubble right now. I'm not really seeing the theory behind that. That is supposed to give you a 50% haze buff. None of them are sitting in it. It does extremely minimal damage. Jack, nothing too dangerous to heal. Of course, the mobs themselves, I believe, do get buffed as well, but still, the DPS could position well in there and DPS them. In the meantime, of course, the reason this dungeon is usually known as a very scary tyrannical dungeon, but even on fortified, so much of this trash has frontal cleaves, frontal lines, like you saw from some of those blade lords. I mean, there's a lot for the DPS as well as the tank to be watching out for that could easily just one-shot you. We saw how low some of the premonitions DPS there dipped just during one pack.
Especially with the stalker mobs that we're seeing here, is they're very, like all of them are trying to jump, for example, out to Malvos, and that's why he had that binding shot down. That's why he was able to get all the stuns out right as they try to jump to him. Gets the stuns off and not really going anywhere. They're not really dealing any kind of damage to him and stuff like that. So maybe that's part of the reason is that Malvos is just trying to make sure he's staying out of range or staying at max range so that any of the different mechanics, any of the ads want to jump to him, have to jump a very, very far distance, and you're going to be able to get like a binding shot off to make sure that it does not actually get to completion.
Both teams very much respecting the danger of this dungeon. We saw in previous series, we had a lot of either skipping of this trash or combining of 2 packs at the same time. But we've also just received word that the bubble indeed did used to, it still does do the 50% haste buff. However, it did such a low threat amount of damage that it's actually been buffed and does do a fairly substantial amount of damage now. And this is probably why the teams are avoiding it, to make sure that they're not having too much damage, especially close to those one-shot mechanics that we did see on trash. So that totally makes sense now.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely seeing just the scary things that can go out from just some of the lines that are happening and just some of the big burst damage that can be going out on these mobs and stuff like that. I mean, they've been doing a very good job of controlling all the explosives. Just getting really, really low there. Top Cat's just proccing his cheat death. Big bubbles coming up, so they're trying to get all these mobs down as fast as they can while also trying to heal through it. So this is where you're going to be seeing a lot of healing coming out of Zach. It's a very awkward situation to be in, fighting on these stairs, making sure you have line of sight on everyone to get them all topped off here. So lots and lots of damage. They got that Wrathguard Invader who has tons of HP and is very, very bolstered. So getting him down very quickly is going to be a priority. So you're seeing E-Man just run away, kite it out, and try not to take any damage from it.
And we did just see there how much the tick damage from that bubble does, and now it actually was quite dangerous. Top Cats, of course, as we said, did proc his cheat death there. I mean, that was close. No deaths on the board, but we can see again just how respectful these teams are to how difficult this trash can be right now. They do honestly does stealth past that one tree patrol. They will have to kind of clear most of this room here to make sure that they have space to fight Aggronox, especially once he spawns the flowers on the side. Definitely don't want those proxying, accidentally aggroing some of these trash monsters.
Yeah, like you're saying, showing the respect to this instance, showing the respect, to the dangers that are coming from it, because for a while, Cathedral Eternal Night was just an instance that most people didn't want to run. It was very scary, especially on Tyrannical, like you were talking about. But even on these fortified affixes, it's just going to be very, very difficult to be able to get all this trash down, just some of the high damage that comes out of it. So, you're really looking for them to be controlling their focus damage, watching out for these explosives, taking down any like these walkers that are left over here.
Yeah, so Premonition moving over to the other side now. They do have 2 more packs to deal with. Of course, these Lashers do a ton of damage. You do have to kind of run away from them. The ones that are channeling that vine that we see in the bottom right corner in order to snap it. Does tons of increased dot damage on the targets. Honestly, moving just a bit slower with their trash pack. It seems that they kill those lower health flowers a bit too fast. And we do know, of course, that it is bolstering, meaning that every trash monster that you kill will buff anything around it by 20%. Health and damage. So if you kind of mismanage your DPS on targets, you're going to end up with, honestly, a mini-style boss that you're going to have to chew through.
And you were seeing there, like with the Walker for Premonition, that was up for a very, very long time, just how much damage it was dealing. E-Man dropping very low here, so he's trying to kite it out, trying to get some space here, trying to get himself topped off very rapidly, then be able to jump back into the fight. It's a very big balance that they're trying to work on here between, getting extra damage off as a healer, and then also making sure that your tank is going to be staying alive here. So it's a trust factor, and it's also just knowing what cooldowns your tank has, what cooldowns your healer has, and how you can most effectively find that balance.
Right, you are. Premonition, of course, finishing up the last flower after they will prepare to pull the first boss, Agronox here, one of our resident trees. Fun fact, of course, about this boss, one of his favorite subjects was trigonometry in school. Did quite well, of course, post elementary days.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so they do pull Agronox here. Now, important to note about this boss, even on non-tyrannical, quite dangerous, does have a pulsing, increasing AoE damage on the party, so acting kind of as a soft enrage. Of course, also has a nuke and pop-up on the tank, and the most dangerous thing being he does spawn these 5 flowers on the side that each fixate a player. Should they reach them, they will explode for mass damage in that area, so it's important to kind of slow them, CC them, make sure they don't reach you, while they quickly AoE it down, which Premonition does an excellent job doing there with the first wave.
Premonition is actually quite aggressive with moving towards those mobs that come out there. I mean, they move towards their spawn location. You saw, you know, Zach dropping his hammer, getting some extra AoE damage out, bringing all of them into one central location, then getting them all AoE down. Whereas honestly is going to be seeing all those ads, you know, kind of coming around each side of that little fountain in the middle, a little garden in the middle, and then having to just focus target them, you know, a little bit separately. I mean, they have double range in the Boomkin and the Warlock, so it shouldn't be too difficult, and you're seeing how they're positioning themselves so they'll be the first ones to kind of jump in.
We do have a death over from Zach. The battle res goes up immediately. Now, the danger with what honestly is doing is, of course, these little ads that come out do spawn explosives. We've seen another one go off here on Premonition side, so start getting quite low from some of the dot damage that's going on in the area. Emangle getting quite low too. If a tank nuke comes, oh, and they don't kill another explosive, it's going to be a full wipe for Premonition likely. I doubt Zach's going to be able to solo a remaining 29% of the boss, so they're just going to have to wipe it up and quickly come back. In the meantime, honestly, still chewing through the rest of the boss at 10% health. Should have no problem dealing with it. Of course, we do know that only 2 waves of flowers come out, and they do indeed down Agronox, and we'll be moving on to the next boss. Look, Jack, I know we have a lot of fun with this boss, but it's time to stop oaking around.
And oaking around might have actually been Premonition's problem in not giving the respect to those explosives there. And as they're just waiting to get back, getting the res off, getting, you know, the reset that they need, it's definitely time lost that they really cannot afford.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. Their strat was better tailored to dealing with explosives by being aggressive and being near those mobs. So by cutting them around the well and going a bit more defensive later, it just ended up costing them. They're going to have to restart on that boss, and of course they don't have Bloodlust available to them this time either. Honestly, already moving up towards the second boss room's worth of trash. Lots of small ads here, lots of imps, and those little book reader guys that throw the books, and you got to kill the books because this boss hates books, as he states when you pull him. A bit of a library area here. They do deal well with those Hellblaze imps, making sure that they all die at the same time. Of course, we know how dangerous bolstering can be, and they will be moving on into the second room momentarily.
Yep, and you know, fighting off the librarians here is going to be the key focus, and definitely line of sighting them. I mean, you're seeing right here just how they're taking their time, making sure they're getting all the mobs that they want all together. It's very, very scary to be able to pull, you know, more mobs than you're anticipating, having more explosives coming out that are just all over the room that are really, really difficult to deal with. I'm kind of surprised, though, that Warlord, for honestly, had kind of ditched the idea of their bubble boy, as they were calling it, you know, completely, just because of the damage. Because you definitely can see, like, you know, in a situation like this, because there's so much damage going on, that's definitely not a priority for you. I mean, you're seeing the ranks, for example, dropping very, very low. But you're seeing, you know, some of the other phases where, you know, it's pretty easy damage, and they just want to be able to nuke it really quick.
I mean, this is a really dangerous situation for, honestly. They kind of bit off more than they could chew here. Tons of explosives spawning. They're having trouble keeping up with it. Not to mention that those scavenger or aka book guy mobs that we talked about do indeed spawn those tomes on the ground. Tons of damage going out. Explosives everywhere. Arcane elementals forming. I mean, it's going to look like they're going to have a full wipe here in a second. Dorothy, luckily, getting out of combat. That last explosive at the top's good. I was just about to say that. He needs to get out of line of sight. A bunch of explosives did go off. Luckily,
he used a battle res.
He did use a battle res. Luckily, they are able to recover at the top of the stairs, which the run back is not so bad because you do hit a checkpoint after you kill Agronox. Premonition only now had just recently engaged Agronox because it's such a punishing run back if you wipe prior to the first boss. But I'm not so sure about that battle res on Honestly's side. Then again, they do have 4 of them, so I guess they can't spare them. They're going to have to regroup here and get ready to pull. Meanwhile, Premonition, of course, for the second time now working on Agronox.
Yeah, no, seeing that explosive go off, just, you know, seemed like time stopped there as Dorothy, of course, was going down. But you got the battle res off in time just to get the res off. And like I said, I mean, they've had 4 battle reses. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal here. You know, now the focus for Premonition is, you know, this is their second win. This is their big opportunity because, you know, they're not fully caught up yet, honestly. But the death counter is very, very close now. So it's something that they can really say, you know, this team is not invincible. We're able to go into these other boss fights. You know, we keep playing our game. We keep focusing on what we need to be doing there, and we can succeed.
Honestly, of course, now more carefully moving through this trash room. We have seen how dangerous it is if you kind of overpull, overstay your welcome there. Premonition in the meantime working down on Agronox. They look like they're in a much more stable situation this time, definitely handling those explosives. You know, Jack, those explosives are definitely, you know, players often think of them as really not that big of a threat because there's not when only 1 or 2 spawn, but when you start to get overwhelmed with a pull this big right now and you're not handling them well, you're not single targeting them down, which also takes DPS away oftentimes from the mobs, it's easy to just wipe and get overwhelmed.
Yeah, and you're seeing it's also not only just how many, the quantity of the explosives, but it's also the positioning of them. It can be very, very awkward. When you're pulling these mobs, you know, from the library into, you know, this back room here, you want to make sure that you have line of sight so the explosives are not going off on you, and you want to make sure that, you know, all of the explosives are going to be focused into one specific area. That way you're going to have that control over where you want to get them down. Right,
you are. Premonition, of course, now finishing off Agronox. That should be a huge relief for them. They'll be moving up the stairs towards the second boss room, pulling some of those dangerous sibs. They do shroud past this patrol. You can usually wait until the patrol pats to the extreme right or left and dodge it just like that, but they don't want to waste any time waiting to have a bit of bad luck with where it was patrolling. Of course, honestly, now dealing with the mini-boss upstairs, Gazerax, which will nuke a small area in front of him near the tank, and is ever so important that you turn around during one of his casts, otherwise you will be disoriented. Now, of course, Jack, you know, following that cast, there's a ton of AoE damage that usually comes in.
Yeah, but you're seeing the Blinding Gaze about to go up, but they got it down in time, so now they're just waiting for Thrash Bite to spawn here. And like you're saying, it's the mini-boss, does tons of damage. It's something you really still have to give respect for. Thrash Bite here is definitely no joke in terms of the tank damage that goes off. You have to be very, very careful. He does have the Pulverizing Cudgel right there. You know, standing in that radius will basically just straight up kill you, but it also deals tons of damage even if you're standing outside of it, so it's a very big focus for the healer to, you know, quickly react to this, get everybody topped off rapidly, and then again contribute more in terms of damage. I mean, Dorothy overall does tons and tons of damage, and it's actually really, really a very big strength that you're seeing in their group composition, that their single target damage is so powerful.
It is, and quite a lot. It is important to know that this boss usually has slightly less health than a lot of the other bosses, just generally through Mythic Plus instances that we see. So of course the main mechanic here is that he will fixate a player randomly. They will have to take cover if they don't have an immunity behind one of these bookcases. Once a bookcase is shattered, it will spawn some of those books, some of those tomes, which is why the boss says books are for losers when you pull him. And you do have to kill those tomes as they're very invasive. Some silence you, some slow you, and with the other boss mechanics that are included, especially that AoE, you can easily get one shot as if you're slowed and can't get out.
Yep, and you're seeing here, I mean, there's multiple other bookcases that you can go to, and like you were saying, they all spawn different ones. So luckily they only had to deal with one bookcase there. But you're looking for Premonition side because they do have that Paladin. You're looking to see if they're going to be using a bop, or they might be, you know, might sacrifice a bubble, although I think that might be a little bit too much. They might be sacrificing a bop, though, just so that they don't even have to spawn any of the bookcases. They don't even have to worry about the little ads. But on a non-tyrannical, it shouldn't be that big of a deal for them.
Yep, textbook safe pull here from honestly the bottom corner, making sure they LOS those large amount of mobs in the room after the second boss. Premonition, in the meantime, working on the trash, leading up to Thrash Bite still, so they're still behind. Emangle does go down. I don't think they have the no, they don't have any battle res.
He is the battle res.
He is the battle res.
Actually got one shot by one of the Fell Imps that was so heavily bolstered there.
And those do target only the tanks, unlike the one in Arcway that splash random people. Gazerax now, they're just kind of desperately kiting him down the stairs. Luckily, he does not melee, just kind of front casts, which is easy to avoid, so anybody can tank him, quote unquote, as he's not really that needed to be tanked that much. So they are able to kind of hold on until he gets back in the meantime. Honestly, now moving over to that dreaded spider room, especially with bolstering coming up. We do have that Spider Queen there that can easily get bolstered by all the little spiders she summons.
Yeah, you're seeing there, they're doing a very, very big pull here to get all of those spiders down, all of them stacked up together. That's where you want to see all the explosives that are lining up there. You see, you know, of course, they're marking targets of where they want them to be, you know, which ones they want to be able to get down first. In the past, we've seen, you know, a number of different weak cores that have been really, really useful for being able to target them, being able to have them, you know, more of a focus for them. So you're seeing they're doing a very, very good job here of getting everything together. You do have to watch out for, I believe it's Nalash's big Fel Orb that'll be coming out, that'll be running through, you know, just a set area, deals tons and tons of damage, be very, very deadly.
Right, you are, with all the webbing going down, leading to a rather sticky situation. You do have to be careful as there is bolstering happening. The reason they killed that first kind of mage spider target is as they're just extremely dangerous with the orbs that go out, so they just decided to bite the bullet there and make sure they bolster the rest of the team. But now they have to be really careful with all these constant little spiders that get summoned to just hit the main priority target, which is, of course, the Spider Queen. As if she gets too bolstered, I mean, she's just going to end up one-shotting everything. Lots of tank damage going out here, especially with those two Enforcers still alive, and the small spiders, that the spiderlings that are summoned do give an increasing poison stack up to 5 on the tank that could prove pretty lethal in the end too.
Yeah, and you're seeing here, Pump is just trying to do whatever he can to get some space now because the bolstering is so very high. You know, they're just trying to get any kind of distance, let you know, themselves get out of combat here. So you're seeing, for example, they're letting the Warlock die. They're all kind of running away. They're all dropping combat here. Then they're rezzing Warlord. They're getting the percent that they need, and then they're moving on from there. So they have the 95% as they're ending the final boss room. But after you kill the second to last boss, there is a couple percent that is left over there. So that'll be enough for them to get 100%. Then they'll be able to engage the last boss.
Indeed, we will have those Fellbats float in. Premonition melee working to finish off the last of Thrashbite here. Sack's damage not as high as I expected to see based on how offensive you said he would be going, but they should be finishing up the boss here momentarily as well. I mean, they're substantially behind at this point. You know, both teams did essentially have full wipes, but the big difference between the wipes is that Premonition's wipe forced them into such a punishing run back from the start of the instance all the way back to Agronox's room, whereas Honestly's wipe, they were able to, well, they did battle res it, but even had they not battle res it, they had that checkpoint at the first boss. It would have saved them way more time. So although there were 2 full wipes, there were just colossal differences in how punishing they were ultimately.
Very true, Salute. And you're seeing here Premonition is doing whatever they can to kind of be catching up here. And like you're saying, you know, the movement, we've been talking about this whole tournament. The movement, the run backs, you know, the little bit of extra time here. It's not always about how quickly can you kill the mobs, it's how is your positioning here and how is your movement throughout this instance. And that's definitely showing as a very big advantage for, honestly. I mean, people were asking, for example, why did they go Alliance? Well, we just saw right there. They engaged the spider packs. They dealt tons and tons of damage to them. They got the percent that they needed. Once they had the percent they needed, they sacrificed their Warlock. All the other, all the rest of the stealthers, for example, all of them dropped combat either through vanishes or through Shadow Meld, I believe, from the Night Elf racial. They all dropped combat, moved upstairs, and they just rezzed the Warlock and moved on.
Very smart play indeed. Of course, here on Domitrex, we have to be careful as at 90 and 50%, he does summon 2 portals, with the 50% portals being the more dangerous ones, as they do spawn these mistresses who do AoE knockback every player within their kind of whirl range. The danger to this is that once the boss reaches 100 energy, he will do a massive room-wide AoE that will essentially one-shot anyone except maybe the tank that does not hide in that middle Aegis area. But of course, you can't also hide in there too long because the Aegis radius does decrease the longer you stay in. They have no trouble with it. Of course, this is not tyrannical, so they don Domitrex and are now getting ready to pull Jack the pack you mentioned prior to the last boss, Mephistroth.
Yeah, but you're seeing the last couple percent that Honestly needs here, being able to get all these little Dreadwings down before they are able to engage with Mephistroth. And of course, you're seeing the Premonition at the bottom here. This is, you know, very much a show of how they're differing in terms of, you know, their pull strategy. You know, they're breaking up the spider pack into 2 different pulls, whereas Honestly was able to do everything in one. And then once they got what they needed, exactly what they needed. So right about at this point here, you're seeing 94%. Honestly stopped at 95%, and then they just sacrificed their Warlock. Everybody else was able to get out of combat, stealth, and just run away.
Right, you are. And Premonition indeed having to pull things a bit slower. So really clever play from the Alliance team there. Honestly, now just finishing up the remainder of those bats. As you said, indeed, they did reach that 100% with it. Mephistroth should be spawning soon for them, and they'll be pulling it momentarily. Meanwhile, Premonition is just dragging the rest of the mobs. They did punt them away. I think they might be doing a similar trick. No, they're just making sure E-Man doesn't go down from the excessive damage and some of the bolstering with those poison stacks. They are going to run up the stairs as the DPS kind of finish these mobs off after they try to chase the tank, and Honestly has indeed engaged Mephistroth, the last boss of the dungeon.
I mean, we've seen a lot of instances where, like, you know, one team has been like a boss ahead, and it's been very, very defined about how much ahead that they actually are. But I mean, when you're having these back-to-back Domitrex and Mephistroth, especially because they're not tyrannical, you know, the difference between these 2 teams hasn't actually been too huge. I mean, it's just, like we were talking about, having, you know, falling back in terms of positioning, or honestly having a little bit better of a strategy and being able to pull all these mobs together, get only what they need, and then move on from there. You know, that extra efficiency. I mean, you're seeing Premonition, for example, at 99%. You know, they did have E-Man go down from those little spiders that were still plaguing him, still following him around all the way up the stairs. You know, not being able to have that drop combat when you want, have that control over the mobs that you really want, definitely is a big setback.
So we do know, of course, there are 2 phases to the Mephistroth fight. We're now seeing the second phase, where usually the tanker is responsible for picking up the Aegis and defending our friend Illidan in the middle of the room. Should any of these shadow balls from the Mephistroth images on the side reach Illidan, it will actually extend this increasing damage phase on the party by, I think, 4 or 5 seconds, something like that. So the tank does need to play defense there while the rest of the melee, while the rest of the DPS, excuse me, go and DPS those images down to make sure things don't get too out of control.
I mean, you're seeing here Pump doing a very, very good job being able to keep the shield up. They're getting out of that second phase there, and then the fight continues. The big thing to kind of watch out for is just the increasing damage that'll come out from Mephistroth. You know, having to drop off these little spikes that are about to come out of the ground. You saw Warlord just dropping off his, and they really pump out lots and lots of damage there. So again, it's just switching gears, and you're seeing just a little bit of damage coming out of Dorothy because he wants to make sure healing is his focus here. You're doing about 1 million HPS, making sure that his entire party is staying topped off and not dropping too low, because even hitting some of these little swirly patches from some of the Dreadwings that'll be dropped off can drop them really, really low and put you in a really rough position.
Indeed, Pumps does do an excellent job there, finishing off the phase quickly, as it would have taken ages otherwise. Honestly, just now we do know that the boss does not retransition to phase 2 until 100 energy. Without a tyrannical setting, it should be pretty simple for, honestly, to finish off the boss here safely without having to re-enter that phase. And I mean, Premonition is just loads behind at this point. Honestly, looks like they're going to pretty easily be able to clinch this first win, and as a result, take 1-0 in the series.
Exactly right, and you're seeing them finish off the last couple percents. First win goes to Team Honestly. Yeah,
the team from Australia, New Zealand continuing to impress. You know, we questioned how far could they go, and they looked really good in this one. You know, there are no questions now about how good this team is. Everyone now knows between this and last series just how good they can be. And now it's just a question of, can they close out this series against Premonition? I want to point out something, too, if you're unaware of kind of the actual logistical circumstances behind this match. These teams are all playing on local servers, right? They're not forced to play on any other region server, so the ping, not an issue, right? Teams have had access to a tournament realm where they're able to practice these affixes on these maps. So this is truly an even setting for both these teams to compete, where they have an even tournament realm to play on. They have had even time to practice. This is what makes this event so cool, right? Both of these teams practice, and you could see it. Honestly, executed that really well in a couple of different spots.
Yeah, honestly, they both did. I actually didn't mean that one.
No, it'll happen. It'll happen.
They very much did, but the big difference is just the wrong wipe at the wrong time. I mean, there's never really, usually a right wipe sometimes, but it was just the wipe that Premonition had was just loads more punishing, because that run back is so brutal compared to the one that we saw Honestly have. So there we see already one of the first explosions that finishes Zach off. He does get rezzed. Of course, these flowers spawning at all different angles. We mentioned this. The explosives do spawn from these ads on the boss. We have another explosive go off. There's a couple tucked away behind the well there that nobody's paying attention to, and eventually they're just going to pop and finish off the group.
And you're seeing just the lasher that had actually spawned exactly on Zach there, had killed him, had distracted the rest of the group, and because those lashers did not all get focused down together, like you're saying, they're getting behind that garden there, and they're dealing tons of damage. Here you see, Honestly is just biting off a little bit more than they can chew, and having all those extra bolsters just knocking down Pump, and then just knocking down the rest of the group there.
And look at the difference between these wipes, though. Both teams take a wipe, but to your point, Sloot, the wipe on Agronox, they already had invested so much time into DPSing Agronox down. A combination of that and the run back, it just eats away so much opportunity cost, whereas the wipe that Honestly took was just, frankly, very low impact.
Yep, and I really liked what Honestly did here as well. It was really smart DPS priority on that Spider Queen, making sure she goes down first, and then really clever use of the Night Elf Racial there, and of course Vanish on the rogue to buy them a bunch of time. That ultimately, Premonition moves slower in that pack anyway, so even if they were neck and neck, it's something that would have gained them even further ahead.
Well, and we've talked all tournament long, small advantages, right? That was a combination of things done perfectly. It was making sure that you are not allowing bolstering to get on a mini-boss. You killed a mini-boss, I don't need this trash. Warlock, unfortunately, over the course of the tournament, kind of been sacrificed quite often for the penalty of being a Warlock, but everyone else just stealth, get out of aggro, we're going, we don't need to deal with this stuff. And how much time does that save them? That's at least 45 seconds to a minute right there, I would think.
Especially with bolstering. You saw how many mobs were left. Some of them were more like larger, higher health mobs, and some of the little. It
would have been a lot of time.
It would have been a lot of unequal play, and yeah, I mean, it's just a ton of time saved.
And it really just shows the execution side of just how well Honestly is doing. They took the big pull, and I like that, right? They took a very ambitious pull, especially for bolstering and fortified. You're like, that is a big pull to take. They're not even team big pull, and they took it. And
it also shows just their preparation. I mean, we were talking, for example, about why didn't they have the Warlock who was enslaving, even though, sometimes you can be healing through the damage, and sometimes it'll actually be more worth just heal through the damage and just deal with it, because it will be very beneficial. But they're showing, because they were switching off, because they weren't even really worrying about having all of those mobs dead in that spider pack, they said, okay, well, we don't even want to worry about having that extra mob in the mix there. We're not even going to have, that enslave out. We're just going to say, let's pull everything, get them all AoE down, get what we need, and then we're out of here.
Yeah, what was so impressive to me is, as those small spiders are actually spawning, it's so easy for some of those classes to do AoE damage, and it's just something that's so natural when you're just clearing a dungeon, right? You would think, okay, of course I want to get rid of this stuff, but the affixes really challenge you to think about the situation and execute very well, and Honestly did. We did not see those bolstering stacks that up on the mini-boss, which, so to your point, 2 stacks of bolstering, and that's a one-shot mini-boss, so...
Yeah, they did force 1 stack of bolstering to make sure they got rid of that caster spider because it's particularly dangerous, can easily one-shot a player accidentally, or especially if they're already low from something else. So they did get rid of that quickly and efficiently, but everything else was just very disciplined. Don't kill anything else, kill the Spider Queen, and we're out of here.
I think that would be the way I would sum up their play all tournament. It has been extremely disciplined. But map number 2 is ready. We will see where Premonition chooses to go. Again, has to get this win. Options are the Arcway, Blackrook Hold, Maw of Souls, Lower Karazhan, and boys, we're going back to everyone's favorite dungeon. It is Blackrook Hold. And with these affixes, what do we think?
Raging Grievous fortified.
Oh, I'm sorry, what? Yeah, so Raging Grievous fortified. I mean, we talked about this earlier, Rob. I think this is very much kind of a curveball dungeon, for sure. Especially with Trash fortified. We all think of that horrible, horrible Trash prior to the second boss. So many different AoE abilities going out. So much damage. So much hard CC interrupt needed. Do we choose to interrupt the commanding shout that buffs the moss 50% health, or do we choose the the blade dance that the rogue does?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, for example, this is a really good pick for this team. I mean, you want to have them play very cleanly. You want to make sure that this is a very challenging dungeon, but also one that's not just as straightforward that we've seen out of, like, Maw of Souls or something like that everyone's been practicing a ton. So, I mean, we've seen Blackrook Hold, Raging Grievous Fortified picked a number of different times to just neutralize, their opponent, especially if they had, a healer. We saw it with, Team Lethal having that picked against them for their Disc Priest. So I think it's going to be a very big strength, playing to Zach's strengths, being able to get people topped off rapidly, dealing with Grievous easily.
I'm a bit worried, though, because there is a very distinct advantage that honestly have with all those safety net battle reses. They have 4 of them.
Right.
And on this kind of Trash that so unpredictably does damage to the group, with the arches shooting randomly, if you don't CC something properly, as soon as you hit the Raging status, I mean, some players could get one shot, and if you have a little bit of a slip up there, honestly has a huge safety net. So I'm curious to see if we're going to see maybe even any comp changes coming out of Premonition now as a result.
Yeah, 2 things really stand out to me about this pick. Traditionally, when we've seen this pick throughout the tournament, the team doing it is a team that has way less skill generally than the other team. So they say, okay, let's mix it up. Let's do something crazy. Maybe they won't be prepared for this map. In this situation, frankly, these are 2 very evenly skilled teams. And what Premonition is saying is, okay, we're just going to go here and we're going to outplay you. We're going to outplay you in a setting where it requires a lot of attention to detail. It requires you to make sure you hit your interrupts, make sure you are dealing with the right mobs at the right time. There's just so much going on, especially with these affixes, that Premonition is just saying, we think we're the better team. We died on Agronox. We'll get you this time around. The other thing that stands out is we talked about the value of battle reses, right? And I said yesterday, if you just think you're the better team, it's fine. You don't need battle reses because you're not going to die. But in this situation now, Premonition has taken some deaths, has been in some circumstances where I'm sure they would have enjoyed a little bit more utility. I'm very curious to see their comp going into this.
I have confidence that they'll stay the same. I think they're of the opinion that they are just so confident, of their gameplay. You are seeing top guys go to Fire Mage here, probably just to deal with some of the extra fortified mobs, some of the extra, Grievous mobs getting down very rapidly. But overall,
probably also because the competition is heating up.
You.
I don't get the joke.
It's a temperature thing.
But yeah, more or less everything's the same. I'm kind of worried because the Rogue does have a ton of survivability as well. I mean, the Mage has some, but
yeah, but you have to watch out for
to
just
the
the burst damage that can be going out there. That's definitely a concern.
Pumps we're seeing with pretty much the similar build here, offensive that we were talking about with that Galactic Guardian build for a lot of that kind of sustained AoE damage that they're going to do across the dungeon. Of course, some survivability as well from the self-healing with those legendaries.
Yeah, but you saw Six Feathered Fan and the Shock Baton there, huge damage. Dorothy also running Shock Baton, so just lots and the Swarming Play Hive, which I believe is just more single target based as well. So yeah, just a lot of damage trinkets that you're going to be seeing out of everyone here. That's going to be just the priority going forward.
I mean, I'd assume that they're going to kind of, they're going to need a ton of CC. You already see some of the, obviously, Guardian Affinity coming in here from, we were just talking how much damage is going to be done on some of these trash packs, and especially on the party. That's really a lot of the danger that comes in with Raging. I mean, yes, of course, it's a huge danger on the tank. They're in control of their life a lot of the time, popping a lot of their survivability personals. But, Jack, you do know a lot of that random splash damage that can happen below 30% on some of this trash is absolutely deadly.
Yeah, and you're seeing, survivability is going to be key. Having all these battle reses for Team Honesty is definitely going to be a big priority here. You want to make sure that you're able to be, keeping people topped off, keeping people in this safe position that they're able to have very, very strong defenses. So that's going to be the biggest concern. That would be the biggest thing that I would be worrying about, especially as Team Honesty has a very nice safety net. Team Premonition needs to really, really focus on getting the perfect stuns, getting as much damage as possible, as early as possible, to make sure that they're getting this stuff down immediately before it starts killing them.
And definitely shout out to the team in the back for providing this information now before the match. Definitely a lot of people always wanted to see this kind of stuff, so I'm glad we're able to get it out
Yeah,
now.
question to you. I can't help but notice that Devil Sword Shock Baton is a blue. And as a casual player, I am led to believe that blue is strictly worse than purple, let alone orange. Do you think having a blue is going to hold them back?
I think that because it's blue, but still scaled to 935, I think they'll be okay. But we'll have to see.
We'll have to see how much of an impact it makes not having full epics and legendaries. But I believe game number 2 is ready. This is do or die for Premonition as well as all of North America. And fittingly, it is October 1st, so we head over to the Spoopy Dungeon.
Spooky. 3, spooky, 5 me.
Right here, of course, we're seeing a very nice overview of the dungeon. We're seeing Team Premonition starting off on the main screen with the red border, and on the bottom, Team Honestly with the blue border starting up here.
I'm going to expect that both teams are, and that's exactly what they're doing. Everyone skips this trash at the beginning. Looks like they had a bit of a boo-boo here. Usually they skip. I guess they're just going to let E-Man die while he pulled the trash and then kind of res him at the top of the stairs. We'll have to see. Honestly, of course, moving very cleanly through it with the kind of quad stealth, and I had to assume the Warlock maybe used their own invis pod. I don't think I saw the Shroud come up. I'll have to double check on that one. They do, of course, start on the first boss here. Nothing too dangerous about this boss. It is a non-tyrannical setting. Make sure you watch out for his frontal 180-degree cleave, as it will nuke you, possibly one-shot you. If not, it'll leave a lingering damage taken debuff as well.
Well, you've seen some name changes coming out of Premonition here, and you're seeing that they're actually going on to Alliance side. So while it was very weird to see, a bear who can actually use stealth actually just go and die to all those mobs, what I believe had happened is that all those mobs were pulled by E-Man, ran through, had everybody who did not have a stealth of their own just drop combat with, the Shadow Meld there, and then be able to move on from there. That way you're not using invis pots, that way you're not, sacrificing multiple members of your team. It's a very, very good play.
Right, you are. They are still a death behind. We'll have to keep an eye on that, of course. Once the boss does reach 50% HP, he will go to the middle and start channeling here. We'll get 8 of these Restless Souls that spawn around the outside of the arena. Slowly, they're making their way to the boss. If they do reach the boss, they will buff one of his AoE huge nuke abilities by, I believe, 100% per, something like that, which you can also manually force by pushing the boss to 15% prior. Of course, honestly, does not want to take any chances making sure they clean all of those ads here, and this 15% hit here should be pretty damaging, but of course, we did see a lot of survivability come up from this team. A lot of bears coming up here. The Rogue should have no problem. The Warlock should have no problem. They clean it up well, and we're just back into phase 1. In the meantime, Premonition having just recently started that phase.
It's huge damage coming out here out of Team Honestly, making sure that, you saw 3 bears popping up the second that burst was coming up, and it's just very, very strong defensives that they have access to, and that's what you're really going to be needing as you're going into some of this harder trash here. Team Premonition is of course nearing that 15% break point there, and it's going to be popping on the defensives. You're going to be seeing the Devotion Aura coming out of the Paladin there. You're going to be seeing Turtles. You're seeing all kinds of extra defensives there just to make sure that you survive, because there is crazy, crazy high amounts of damage.
Yeah, so here does come indeed the AoE from Premonition. Now we'll see how they prepare for it. Should be no problem there. Lots of immunities used. The Warrior probably had a sack, I would assume, on him, and of course the Bear needing no extra attention. They usually barely take any damage. Honestly, now dealing with the RP that will lead up to the ever so evil and dangerous trash that we constantly keep talking about. They'll have to start making their way up the stairs here and being careful for the first mobs, that the trash monsters that they do see, which will be these spiderlings.
I mean, you've seen, an interesting thing we've seen in a lot of other dungeons, especially a lot of other teams. You've seen, snowball effects where, one team is just